Good evening. Tonight in the late debate, we put the Minister for London on the spot and we ask, has politics become too nasty?
People abuse me because they can't take on my argument. They see the value in my argument, so they think they'll just attack me instead. But you just have to grow a thick skin.
But first, the Johnson, who's the government's point man for the capital. He's the Johnson who made it to Downing Street. Long before Big Brother Boris was even in government, Joe Johnson was inside Number 10 as head of David Cameron's policy unit. Cameron made him a minister. He served in the Cabinet Office and then as Minister for Universities and Science. He sat alongside astronaut Tim Peake to promote Britain's space programme.
We are truly going to be across the solar system.
He criticised the high salaries enjoyed by some university leaders and promised to crack down on campuses where so-called safe spaces stifled debate.
It's critical that we uphold the principle of freedom of speech within the law.
In January, Theresa May made him Minister for London, where his new responsibilities included the £4 billion super sewer.
This is going to keep us moving as a city in all ways.
But Minister for London was a sideline. His day job was Rail Minister in the Department for Transport, where he soon found himself having to defend new train seats, described by some commuters as ironing boards.
It's a firm upholstery, but I think people will get used to it. Perfectly comfortable.
The 12:26 Thameslink service to Rainham has been cancelled.
His ministerial ride was about to become even more uncomfortable as new timetables descended into chaos. London commuters on Govia Thameslink Railway bore the brunt of the misery, and the minister put GTR on notice.
We will not hesitate to take tough action against them if they are found to have been negligent.
But 2 weeks later, Mr Johnson was seeing improvements, although commuters probably didn't share his optimism.
On-the-day cancellations, which are extremely frustrating for passengers, have significantly reduced.
More recently, the minister had to break the bad news that Crossrail was £600 million over budget, and even worse, wouldn't now open until next autumn. Welcome, Joe Johnson, not only Minister for London, but also the Conservative MP for Orpington. Minister, first of all, earlier this week, Sadiq Khan said he couldn't say whether he has confidence in the management of Crossrail. Do you?
Well, it's really disappointing that Crossrail is going to be late. This is a flagship project for London, a flagship project for the country. And I was terribly disappointed, as was the Secretary of State, as was the Mayor, when Crossrail told us on the 30th of August that they were not going to be able to meet their December timeline for the opening of the central section that we've all been looking forward to. It's vital now that they establish exactly when that's going to be ready. They've put forward a new timeline of autumn 2019, and we want to work with them to deliver it. It's going to be fantastic for London when it opens. We mustn't lose sight of that in the bigger picture. It's going to increase London's rail capacity by 10%. It's going to bring 1.5 million people within 45 minutes of the capital's entertainment and business districts. And it's really going to be transformational for this capital city.
So you have confidence in the Crossrail management?
Well, I want them to finish the job. Okay, they've done a great job in getting this great project to the stage it's reached today. It's 95+% complete. It's been Europe's biggest civil engineering project for a decade, and now they've got to get it over the line and get it open.
When did you know that the delay was going to take place, that there was going to be any hold-up?
Well, not fast enough is the answer to that. We wanted to know sooner that they were going to encounter a delay of this magnitude.
Did you know in July or August?
At this stage in the project. We were notified by Crossrail as one of the two sponsors. You've got to remember that Crossrail is a 100% subsidiary of Transport for London, but the department is a co-sponsor of the project. We help fund it, obviously. And we were notified by Crossrail alongside TfL on the 30th of August. The Crossrail board had met on the 29th of August and realised...
Did you not know before that there were delays coming down the tunnel?
Well, in any big infrastructure project, there are always going to be a set of risks that are being managed at any one time. And the Crossrail board met on the 29th of August and determined that those risks could no longer be managed in the timeline that they had set out and that they had been working to. And the following day, on the 30th of August, we were formally notified in the department, and as was the Mayor Sadiq Khan over at TF.
The Mayor has told us that he was briefed in July that there were problems. Did you know as early as July that there were problems, a possible delay?
Of course, there are always, as I said, risks being managed, potential problems. But it's only when the board formally says, OK, we're not going to be able to manage these risks, There are always going to be challenges integrating systems on a complex project like Crossrail is. The board of Crossrail met on the 29th of August and formally decided they were no longer going to be able to manage the risks to the timelines that they'd all wanted to, and told us then. So that's when those risks crystallised.
Do you know how much more it's going to cost?
No, not yet. There is going
That's
to be
worrying, isn't it?
There is going to be a delay. And delay means extra cost because you've got to keep the teams on the ground, working on the tunnels, testing the trains, and that's all unfortunately going to take longer than we wanted. But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here, which is that Crossrail is a fantastic project for London. It's a great project for the UK economy. It's going to generate almost £50 billion of additional wealth for our economy. Let's not run it down. It really will be transformational when it's up and running. And in the bigger scheme of things, when you look at other big infrastructure projects of this scale, it's actually doing pretty well. It's not more than 10% over budget at this stage. It's not significantly late. Look at other projects around the world. I think there's an airport in Germany which is years late and hasn't even opened yet.
It'd be better if it wasn't late at all. But anyway, we'll have to take your word for it that it's going to be that good. Londoners will have to take your word for it. At the moment, what they do know is that some services in the capital have been risible this summer. You promised to take tough action against GTR if they didn't get their act together. Are we going to see any tough action?
Well, GTR hasn't been performing acceptably in the wake of the May timetable change, and as passengers saw, it's been a disappointing summer. In recent months, obviously some time has now elapsed since May. Performance has been improving significantly, and it's now performing in the 80s in terms of percentage of trains arriving within 5 minutes of their scheduled arrival time. Passengers have had a special compensation scheme, those on the most severely affected lines, which mean that they've been entitled to a month's free travel. But obviously passengers don't just want the compensation, they want absolute reliability and punctuality of their services. And we are, in the department, going to hold GTR to account for that. There has been a big review, as you know, into its performance.
We haven't seen the results of it
undertaken by the regulator. We're awaiting the final report, and the department will consider that very, very carefully when it looks at what steps need to be taken in relation to GTR.
Rail isn't your only responsibility. You are the Minister for London. You aren't involved with the Home Office, but you must watch with alarm what has been happening to crime in London. How much is the Mayor to blame for the murder rate?
Well, crime has complex causes, and it would be wrong specifically to point responsibility just to the Mayor. But obviously prioritisation of the resources that he has at his disposal will always be a factor. And we have noticed that, community policing, frontline policing is perhaps not as much of a priority for this Mayor
as it has Tory
been,
cuts and
as it has been for
cuts
previous
in austerity.
Well, the government's maintained funding, the Home Office grant for policing, and the Mayor has at his disposal additional revenues which he can raise from his precept on council tax, which he could use to support frontline policing. I'm concerned that under the previous Mayor we saw consistently 32,000 police on the beat, on the streets, and that number has fallen under this Mayor. And it is important, I think, that he recognises the role that frontline policing plays in assuring the public that they're going to be safe when they go about their lives.
Do you think there should be more police on the streets in London?
Well, I would welcome a refocusing of the Mayor's priorities to
more
what
police
the,
means
to what the
less
public
crime, presumably.
to what the public is really concerned about. We want to be safe on our streets. We want to see the Mayor focusing the resources that he has, that we've protected as central government, being put to work to keep people safe.
Why do you think he's not focusing on the resources in the right place? Where's he spending the money?
Well, he's got his own set of priorities, but we would want to see police numbers rise. We want to see more visible policing on our streets to keep our public safe.
Housing is another big issue for Londoners. The Mayor is right in one sense that houses are being built, homes are being built, but they're not the right kind. They're not affordable. That's the real problem in London, isn't it? It's not the numbers, it's the right kind of homes.
Well, it is disappointing that we've seen the rate of home building in London slow. I saw some figures out this morning that suggested the number of homes being built in London this year was at its lowest in 6 or so years. We do need to get London's home building moving again. Again, this is a case where central government has given the Mayor resources. We gave him £1.7 billion in this spring's budget, similar amount the previous year. He's got to start delivering on home building. There are too many big projects across London, whether it's in Haringey or elsewhere, that are being held up for ideological reasons about the mix of properties in a particular development. all properties, all big developments to get going need a mix of properties. We need to crack on with it and stop playing politics with home building.
Minister for London, Joe Johnson, thank you very much for coming in to talk to us this evening. Now, it's often said that politics is a tough old game, but recently the levels of abuse seem to have reached new heights, as the Tories' mayoral candidate, Sean Bailey, has discovered.
My name is Sean Bailey and I will be the next Mayor of London.
When Sean Bailey was chosen as the Conservative candidate for mayor, he knew he'd be in Labour's firing line. But as controversial comments from his past began to surface, he also faced a tirade of personal, sometimes racist abuse on Twitter, with comments like, "Sean Bailey is the biggest Uncle Tom to walk the planet. Sean Bailey is a lying coconut as far as I'm concerned."
I've had a lot of racist abuse, in particular, since I've been involved in public life. All I would say to anybody trying to get involved is you've got to soldier on. What I always comfort myself with, people abuse me because they can't take on my argument. They see the value in my argument, so they think they'll just attack me instead. But you just have to grow a thick skin, which is really unfortunate.
These politics students at Queen Mary's University in London's East End recognise Bailey's experience has become the new normal.
What he has said he should be held accountable for, because it is something that needs to be addressed whether he wants to do it or not. But equally you shouldn't use it against their character.
It's devolved into a free-for-all in terms of personal abuse, and it's made British politics quite immature, I think, and made the British public look quite immature.
Social media acts as this platform whereby people see no physicality in it. They're behind their keyboard, they can say whatever they want with no repercussions.
I'm not saying it's good for them. You have to be prepared to put up with that with celebrities or public figures, especially in politics, because you have to say what you think and believe and feel. Somebody's going to disagree with you and somebody's going to share that opinion.
Bailey's main rival in the 2020 race for City Hall is the current Mayor Sadiq Khan. He too has faced hostility, abuse and racism online.
I can understand why people have got concerns about some of the things that Sean Bailey has said. What is not acceptable, it is not acceptable, is to be abusive and definitely to use racist language against any candidate, let alone candidates standing to be the Mayor of London. We should be encouraging minority communities to get involved in politics. We should be encouraging all young people to get involved in politics. And this sort of language, racist language in particular, discourages young people getting involved in politics rather than encourages them.
In the last election for mayor in 2016, David Cameron attempted to draw links between Khan and some radical preachers.
It is very important that we do not back these people and we do not appear on platforms with them. And I have to say, I am concerned about Labour's candidate as Mayor of London, who has appeared again and again and again.
That Conservative campaign was later condemned as one of the nastiest in recent London elections. Both Tory and Labour candidates are promising a much cleaner fight in 2020. Joining me to discuss that are the Labour MP for Enfield North, Joan Ryan, for the Conservatives, the Sutton and Cheam MP, Paul Scully, and Green Party co-leader Sian Berry, who's a London Assembly member and a Camden councillor. Welcome all of you. Sian, first of all, you were in that mayoral contest last time round. How bad was it?
It was awful, actually. I mean, during the contest and afterwards, I condemned the rhetoric that was coming out, not only from Conservative supporters, actually, but from the Conservative campaign itself. We had editorials from the candidate in the Daily Mail trying to link Sadiq Khan with Islamic extremism. And it was definitely a dog whistle. And this is what you get sometimes from the campaigns, particularly when Linton Crosby is running them, I have to say. He ran the Conservative campaign last year, and that focused far too much attention on, for example, Diane Abbott. And she's been the
Paul,
MP
you're going to be in charge of
the
next mayoral campaign for the Tories. Are you going to make sure it's not like that?
Will you keep Linton
This isn't about division. This is absolutely what Sean's going to be doing. What he is doing is articulating a positive, aspirational vision.
Do you regret that
for
last
London.
campaign and repudiate it?
Look, I mean, first of all, Sadiq Khan was a human rights lawyer previously, so but what I don't want to do. No, absolutely not. But so it meant that some of the people that he was working with, dealing with at some point were possibly choice, but the point is not to dwell on that, to talk about policy.
Just said it. You made it the whole point of your
that's what I'm just saying
campaign.
at that point. So it's important
it was
to actually
wrong,
talk about evidence. It's not what I'm going to do this time. It's not what Sean's going to do this time. And what would be absolutely fatal, whether it's Sadiq, whether it's us, is to fight the last campaign this time. Londoners need better.
Joan, is there a line to be drawn between attacking someone for what they said a long time ago and attacking their policies now? I mean, the Labour Party seems to be going for Sean Bailey already over comments in the past.
Well, we've heard the excuse that Sean was young. I understand he was in his mid-30s when he made some of the unacceptable comments and retweets.
Like the suggestions that
the suggestions they're Islamophobic as well and misogynist.
In particular, I think also the comment that single mothers use the housing system, become pregnant to get a flat.
You can't, you know, in politics, you can't walk away from your own past. People are going to look at your record and judge you on that record, and they're going to want to know why you said those things and if you've changed your mind. What he shouldn't have coming at him is abuse because of what he said, but he does have to account for these kind of views. And I think, you know, we do not want what we saw last time coming from what was then a Prime Minister, David Cameron, from Zach Goldsmith, who was the candidate. And, you know, I am worried to hear Paul say, and I work with Paul on other issues, so I know it doesn't have to be this way, but I am worried to hear Paul say, well, he was a human rights lawyer. He worked with, you know, everybody, whoever he worked with, they are entitled to be defended, to have a lawyer. That doesn't mean...
Sean Bailey's entitled to have a past which he
is entitled to have a past.
Can forget and move on.
These are very different kinds of pasts, aren't they? What we're talking about with Sadiq is he was doing his job as a human rights lawyer, making sure people had the right to be defended, however the judgment went in the end.
Question.
But with Sean has
question.
made statements that can seriously be called into question when he was not a young man, he was in his mid-30s. He has to account for them, but under no circumstances should he be facing any kind of racist abuse. That is completely
So will you
wrong.
condemn Emma Dent Code, who called him a token ghetto boy?
I would condemn any abuse.
I mean, she's one of your fellow. She's one of your fellow MPs.
I would condemn any abuse that is racist, homophobic, that is Islamophobic, is anti-Semitic. Any abuse of that nature is completely wrong. I will not defend it. It should not happen.
We know
Sean, how far back should opponents of Sean Bailey go into his past in the next campaign?
I think, I mean, if you've got previous comments made by Sean that were offensive, it is something he has to account for. But I think we've got to be fighting the next mayor election on the ideas that we have for London. In terms of Sadiq Khan, we can hold him to account for his record now, for the fact that a lot of the slogans he spoke about in 2016 are still that, they're not policies that he's actually enacted. That is absolutely fair enough. It's when things start to become personal that we find the toxicity that there is out there on social media gets ignited. So if you're a female, if you're black, those are things that really rile up the people on Twitter. And if the campaigns dwell on people's personal attributes, that's what sets it off. And we have to be really, really careful about how we do it. We can't be running.
Is the fact that Labour is so eager to dig up Sean Bailey's past an indication that perhaps they are worried about defending Sadiq's record?
No, and I first of all, I don't think that it's eager to dig up his past. He has made public statements. He has to account for them. If you're coming into public life, you have to account. You are subject to scrutiny.
But Joan, they were pretty hot off the press, weren't they? Pressing the buttons on Twitter.
Scrutiny is part of our democratic process, and it's the right thing to do. So I don't think we need to excuse that. I think it's the right thing to do.
But to have a bank of researchers coming up with a month and a half, you know, they had a month and a half coming up with this sort of stuff because you could see there was a push-button campaign going across Twitter.
Are you worried that he can't stand on his record? And
no,
can't account for the way he's
Sean will stand on his record. But what I think the question was about the fact what the question was about whether Labour are worried, and I think they are trying to fight the election because actually, if you look at, as Sean says, if you look at Sadiq's record or lack of delivery and look at his record in office, That's not a good record.
Can I just answer the rest of the question? I think the record,
can I just bring this round to
another
in
office,
to something else,
I think, is a record we can stand up and be proud of.
Can we talk about crime in London? And in particular, you raised something last night in the House of Commons, which is a very pertinent point.
We need to protect these children who are vulnerable, who are leaving Enfield with every orifice stuffed with Class A drugs to sell in areas like that of my honourable friend for Barrow-in-Furness.
That's pretty strong and graphic stuff, every orifice. Is it really?
Yes, yes. And we're talking about a very fast-growing business model type of crime that's making huge sums of money for the people who are running it. And, you know, in London, Sadiq has taken this on. He has put money into youth projects. He has put money into £145 million.
Sean, you beg to differ.
Yeah, can I just say he's done that following.
Of course he should do that. But what we've seen in the last 8 years is a £1 billion cut to the Metropolitan Police. And we also know that the National Crime Agency for the last 3 years have warned the government about this kind of crime that is blighting London, and the government took no notice.
Can I say that? I mean, Sadiq has put money back into youth services, but it was a year late. It was a year after we first, in the Greens, pushed him to do that. We've been monitoring the cuts to youth services, trying to point out that there needs to be a public health approach to crime, and the other parties are absolutely just catching up on this. But where this is relevant to Sean Bailey's previous comments, actually, particularly the comments on single mothers, is his approach to crime and youth crime is very much to sort of blame the families and blame the individuals for poor choices, and the public health approach does the exact opposite of that. It tries to look at the environment young people grow up in, the temptations that there are, and try to protect them from people who want to exploit them. And that is a very different sort of opinion that we have, a different policy that we have, and whereas previous comments are actually very, very relevant.
Well, I think actually some of the papers that he wrote, especially the ones 10 years ago, was actually his account of being a poor black child growing up in West London, in council estates in West London, and it was those sort of attitudes,
and
it was that sort of approach, and
it
was how communities integrate. And as Joan says, we do a lot of work with various communities, diaspora groups, and it is really important to work with them to make sure that they integrate. But in terms of county lines, actually, Joan was absolutely right when she was talking about officers.
Joan, Paul, Sean, I'm afraid we've run out of time. Very quick question, Sean. Your party hasn't chosen a candidate for mayor yet. Do you want to do it again?
I will be standing again. Hopefully they will choose me and we'll find out early in the next year.
Thank you very much, Sean. So thank you to all my guests tonight, to Joe, John, Paul and Sean. I'll be back next month with another edition of The Late Debate. Until then, thank you for watching and good night.